You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast produced by Veteran Strategies and featuring conversations with fascinating and impactful men and women who have shaped our world, our communities, and our history. My name is Robert Vane, Principal of Veteran Strategies, and your host for our discussion. You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmon Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and McAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. You may find all your sales and rental equipment needs at McAllister.com. We are pleased to announce our podcast is a member of the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact Chris Spangle and me at leadersandlegends.net. Thank you for joining us on the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our subject matter today is the incomparable life, times, and language of Rex Early. And I should remind our three guests that there is no profanity allowed on the Leaders and Legends podcast. Murray Clark, my former boss and chairman of the Indiana Republican Party. Ann Delaney, my friend Ann Delaney. Is that fair?
Fair enough.
Former chairman of the Indiana Democratic Party, and our frequent guest or co-host in this case, Jim Shella, political reporter emeritus, Wish TV. Thank you all so much. I know Rex meant a lot to all of you. There's no way that we could let his passing go without acknowledging his life here on the podcast. So we'll do ladies first. Ann, please tell us your first meeting with Rex, how long you've known him, and kind of your general friendship with him.
Well, I first met him when he became chairman of the party, and I was doing Evan's reelection campaign for governor, and we tangled, it's fair to say, through that. And for a couple of years after that, before we became friends, he started appearing on Indiana Week in Review, which was always a challenge because I thought the further away he got from Knox County, the more pronounced his accent and aphorisms were. So, you'd sit opposite him, and we were live at the time, so there was no pausing.
Live on the radio.
Live on the radio, so there was no pausing it. And he would say he's meaner than a boar chigger, and I'm sitting there saying, is that B-O-A-R, B-O-A-R-D, B-O-R-E-D, so.
B-O-A-R.
I figured that out, but it was much later. Thanks, Jim. It's not something that comes up much in Meridian Kessler, I'm afraid. But anyway, then we got to know each other. After the campaign was over, we became friends, I think it's fair to say.
Murray, you've probably known him as long as anybody.
Yeah, I don't... So he was in the legislature with my dad in 1962. He and Dad were really good friends, and they were
Marines.
Both Marines. Oh yeah, and they served in the legislature 1962 one term, and they were able to turn a 2-1 Republican majority into a 2-1 Democrat majority in one term.
It's really an accomplishment.
And
64 was a bad year for...
Well, 64 a bad year, but also, that was the term when Indiana sales tax was created, enacted. And every one of them always said they voted against the sales tax, right? I think there's
amazing how it passed.
Yeah, right. Revisionist history there. And then he was but I think I met him probably when Alex ran for election again for mayor in 1967.
Your uncle.
Yeah, my uncle Alex Clark, right? So he was mayor in 51, and you couldn't succeed yourself, and they talked him into running again. He got beat by some guy we've never heard from again named Luger. But, so it's been kind of that long. And then, he coached CYO at St. Matthews, and he coached Pat, and we played at St. Luke, and we'd play them and all that. So I've known him a long time.
Jim, I want you to please talk about your relationship, how you met Rex, and then I'd like you to take over the podcast for a little bit and keep the conversation going.
Okay. Well, I can tell you, I first met Rex on the day he was elected state Republican chairman. I was at Republican headquarters to cover the vote. 91.
91.
It was 91. He got left outside the room while they held this secret vote. Yeah. So it was just him hanging with the reporters, and you get to know Rex in a hurry. Let me just say that.
Did you know who he was before then at all?
Oh, sure. And there was no doubt that he was going to be the new chairman, because the Republican Party was in big trouble, and previous chairman had taken a salary, a rather hefty salary, and he had agreed to take the job for nothing, and try to bring the party back to life, because it was broke at that point. So that's
financially and otherwise.
Yeah. And then later in 1991, I was hired to be the host of Indiana Week in Review. And I'll tell you more than you want to know here, maybe, but I was hired shortly before the previous host was fired, and there was a little dust up in the newspapers. Everybody on the panel, it's a 4-member panel, everybody on the panel swore their allegiance to the previous host, who said he was going to start another show. So the first thing I did when I got the job was start calling everybody who had been a panelist to say, you didn't get fired, you're still welcome, just want you to know there's no hard feelings from me. And before I could get to Rex, who had apparently just become the Republican panelist, he called me. And I said, hey, aren't you going to swear your loyalty like these other folks did? And he said, listen, to quote Bill Jenner, that loyalty is as deep as a cow pissing on a flat rock. To which I said, Rex, you're on the show.
He was your first panelist.
He was.
Do you think the dynamic between Rex and Ann helped propel that show to a different place?
Short answer is yes. But as Ann said, I can tell you the first several shows that we did with Rex and Ann, first of all, it's a new format. I've never been the host before. I think it would have been a tense environment regardless, but the tension between the two of them was
Caught with a knife.
Was that just radio then?
No, it was on TV, but
TV.
it was live on the radio. But at the time when we did it, they were taping it for TV. Yeah, it was an adventure. But the reality is, it became known to many people as the Rex and Ann Show, or the Ann and Rex Show, which is a much better name than Indiana Week in Review, by the way.
It's better branding.
It is. We should have just gone with that. We got really good ratings for a public affairs show, really good. Those things usually don't get ratings, and if they do, it's a 1. And we got some crooked numbers. It became something of a phenomenon.
Yeah, it took a while, though.
Right.
When we visited Rex literally on his deathbed about a week before he died, he said that he'd always loved me. And McDaniel standing there says, lying to the last, Rex.
You should tell the story about his aunt.
Well, he had an elderly aunt in the nursing home at one point when he was doing the show, and he went to visit her, and he was leaving her room, and the person in the room across the hall called out and said, "Are you the TV man?" And he kind of puffed up and said, "Why, yes, I am." And she said, "Well, mine doesn't get any channels."
Brought down to earth.
Yeah. Well, I will. We all know Rex could. He was proud of his accomplishments and wanted people to know who and what he was. But he had perspective. He had perspective.
When
He loved telling that story. That's the point.
Yeah.
how did you manage, Jim, as the host? How did you manage the dynamic between Rex and Ann in the sense that you want there to be some sparks, but you don't necessarily want that to generate into some giant screaming match?
Well, that's not to say it didn't. The format of the program was I would create 4 or 5 topics, and I would notify everybody of the topics ahead of time so they could do research if necessary. Wouldn't tell them what the questions were or what direction the discussion was going to go. But especially in the early days, it seemed like, and the first 1 or 2 topics were always the most political, and the discussion would devolve into a screaming match. And my line, which some people quote back to me to this day, was moving on. And we just go on to the next topic.
I've been a victim of that. Murray, have you been a victim of that?
Yeah.
Did you ever say it to Ann?
I think I just said it to the room in general. We're moving on. Next topic.
And we had some catharsis. I mean, remember the time Rex was out in the parking lot and slammed his attaché case down and said, "You try defending that."
Lindley Pearson.
Pearson.
Well, but the best part of that story is that we weren't even on the subject. We had left the program. We were walking to our cars, and we were talking about something
completely different.
And he just stopped, took this leather binder over his head, and slammed it on the parking lot, and said, "You try to defend Lindley Pearson."
And was your attitude towards the show different when Rex was on? Did you feel like you had to be more aggressive because you knew what he was going to say or do?
Yes. And well, for 2 reasons. First of all, when you've got an incumbent governor who's going to listen to the show and is going to tell you what he would have said had the question gone to him.
Your incumbent governor.
My incumbent governor. When you don't have an incumbent governor, it's easier. But when you've got 2 or 3 people in the administration listening to it and having 24 hours to figure out what they would have said, which would have been infinitely better than what I said, it gets a little stressful.
Watch the show.
Well, and I will say that incumbent governor, Evan Bayh, in case you wondered what he thought of the show, when I was trying to create this panel initially, I went to Bill Morrow,
right,
who was on the governor's staff, and asked him to be a panelist. And
he frequently reminds me of that.
Right. But my understanding is it went to the governor, and he said no, Ann would be a better choice.
With Morrow, nobody would have watched it.
They would have. They would.
And he was served as a substitute. I mean, I always liked having a permanent panel cast and try to have the same group as often as possible.
To that point, Ann, I remember when I was working for Murray as comms director at the State Republican Party, and Jennifer Wagner was comms director at State Democratic Party, and we used to do shows and stuff like that together. Mm-hmm. You know, I always felt like I had to really be on my game because Jennifer was so smart. Mm-hmm. So in your situation, not only did Rex love politics and knew what he was talking about, but did you feel like, I'm not going to let that SOB get away with calling me an SOB because I'm going to call him an SOB first? Like, did you feel that way?
There's an element of that. The other problem, though, with Rex is that you could never be sure which angle he was coming from. I mean, you get a fairly straightforward question, and it would be one of these bank shots, tinkers to evers to chance, and you're trying to wrap your mind around it. At the same time, you have 30 seconds to come up with a response.
Right.
So it was challenging.
And sometimes he would give an answer that really wasn't directed at the audience. It was intended for the guys at the Antelope Club or the White River Yacht Club,
or somebody he wanted to settle a score with.
Right.
Were you on that panel with us when we went to the governor's
disability
conference on yes.
Yes.
You want to tell that story?
Well, I mean, we did. First of all, we would do a lot of luncheons and
Right.
You did a lot
statewide conferences.
Yeah, we
yeah.
did.
And it was the governor's conference on disabilities, and Ann made some point that Rex wasn't taken with you, and he said. Even Ray Charles could see that.
There was an audible gasp from the audience.
Did Rex ever call you up, speak to Jim and Ann, and go, "Man, you know what? I shouldn't have said that," or "I'm sorry I said that," or
I don't think he ever regretted anything he
said. No,
I mean he loved to tell stories about how he got in trouble. He would. I think somebody in management at WFYI at one point pulled him aside and suggested that he should avoid making a remark like one or two. He made a couple of remarks that I think you can fairly describe as racist on the show, and they suggested that maybe he should try to avoid that, and he would just tell people about the comment he made and how they reacted to it. I mean, contrition was not
part of his vocabulary.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast, and we're discussing the life and legacy and humor, among other things, of just past former chairman of the Indiana Republican Party, Rex Early. And we're here with Ann Delaney, Murray Clark, and Jim Shella. Murray, you became chairman about 20 or so about 14 years after Rex did. Did he give you any words of wisdom as you ascended to the chairmanship?
Well, he wanted to make sure he was going to be a national delegate. To Jim's point, the state party was broke when he got there, and he literally sold, national delegate positions. And to all his buddies, right? So that's how he filled the coffers. And, if I don't know about you, but if I'd have tried to do that, they would have hung me by my ankles on Monument Circle.
Suddenly the delegation had a lot more Southern Indiana bankers with big rings.
Well, I mean, it was in Houston, and it was Jug, and it was all his buddies, and it was actually a lot of fun. And he decided that he wanted to leverage my chairmanship, so he called me up and he said, I've got this book going. And I said, yeah, that's what I understand. And he says, well, it's not out in print yet, but we'd like to have the initial launch and book signing at state headquarters. And I said, well, that sounds, like a great idea. What were you thinking? We talked it through. And Kevin Ober at the time was my ED, and he comes in, he says, you think we should read it first? So we got a manuscript because it hadn't, and we both read it all the weekend and laughed all the way through it. But he was really stridently critical of some people that were friends, so.
Republicans were
Oh, yeah. So I called him on Monday. He says, what do you think? I said, it was great. I said, there was that one chapter on so-and-so, do you have to have it in there? And he said, well, hell yes, whatever. And I said, well, you forgot something in there. You forgot a big item. He says, no, I didn't. I said, yes, you did. And he said, what is it? I said, I'll tell you what, I'll trade you my story for the one we want you removed. And he said, I'll do it if it's good. And it was the one about Angie stealing Steve Goldsmith yard signs.
Oh,
his daughter, Angie.
Yeah. Angie, his daughter, who looks like her mother and acts like her father, and worked 24/7 for her dad when he ran for governor in 1996 in the primary, and was notorious for taking interns out in her van in the dark of the night and stealing Steve Goldsmith signs, and then going first thing in the morning at the Rex Early headquarters and calling the Steve Goldsmith campaign headquarters and giving them hell for stealing Rex Early for governor yard signs.
So did he hold his book signing at headquarters?
He did, yeah.
And he had Ed look it over for possible libel actions too.
Did he?
Before
I bet
had
he did. Well, I think I put a little fear in him.
I do, but I want to just jump back to the previous campaign, the '92 that you mentioned, Evan Bayh against Lindley Pearson. As long as you're on the subject of yard signs, Rex went out and had some yard signs printed.
I have one.
I still have mine.
I do.
I still have mine. You'll recall that then the 6th congressional district, the Democratic nominee was a fellow by the name of Bobby Hidalgo.
Citizen Kern.
Kern. Bobby Hidalgo Kern, who, amongst other things, was
Controversial.
Known to be a cross-dresser and had an arrest record and really wasn't
He
embraced.
would call me when I worked at the election board for Marion County and disguise his voice as a woman. And
He pretended he was the 5th. How many Charlie's?
The last Charlie's Angel,
The fourth
Tanya
Charlie's,
Roberts.
Yeah.
He would call up. He would call me and identify himself as Tanya Roberts.
and I would tell him I couldn't be helpful, and I gave him Ed Tracy's number.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Rex went out and had yard signs printed that said "By Hidalgo," although he misspelled Hidalgo.
Hidalgo, yeah.
Details. And put one in your lawn, right?
And one in ours, one in Glass's next door, one
in
Morrow's.
mine, one in mine,
one in yours.
I want to go, because you'll never find a yard sign in my yard, and I would wake up in the morning and say, "What's that?"
Did you know automatically? I mean,
Sure. Where else would it come from?
Well, by that time, he'd been to our houses.
Yes.
Yeah.
But to finish up your question, our chairmanship is so different, right? To Ann's point, Rex didn't have an incumbent governor, right? So he could, and
So you
whereas
can call the shots.
yeah.
let's talk a little bit. We mentioned it a few seconds ago. The 96 campaign for governor. Steve Goldsmith gets reelected for a second term in 1995 as mayor of Indianapolis. Everyone pretty much knows he's running for governor in 96. If you look at his vote total in 91 and his vote total in 95, it's significantly different, even though you can argue he was running against a weaker opponent in 95 as opposed to Louis Mahern in 91. Why did Rex run for governor? Did he really think he could beat Goldsmith? I mean, that's kind of a yes question, but what was going through his mind? And how did he react to not winning that primary? Murray?
Well, I mean, I think he thought he could win. And the one thing about being a state chairperson, you meet people all over the state, you make new friends, you make, alliances and so forth. And I think he thought that, Steve didn't have those, right? And that Steve wasn't maybe the greatest retail politician ever and so forth. And I mean,
Plus, he couldn't stand it.
Well, there's that. And then so
Did Goldsmith hate, did Steve dislike Rex as much as Rex disliked Steve? Or is that possible?
I don't know. Probably not
Goldsmith
possible.
treated everybody with this.
Yeah, that's right. No.
Yeah.
I was 0 for 2 that election. That was great. For Rex in the primary and then for Goldsmith in the general.
Well, that was the real mistake right there.
Again, he was popular. He was popular and so forth. They just, Steve had
Money.
a
lot of money.
Yeah, a lot of money.
I can tell you, if Rex had won that primary and the fall race had been Frank O'Bannon versus Rex Early, I think that would have been very entertaining. Two guys from Southern Indiana.
They were good friends, too, though.
They were.
Yeah.
And Rex always was, to me, he was always complimentary about Evan Bayh.
Actually, I think they served with Frank's dad in the legislature.
That could be.
Yeah.
That could be.
Well, and to the Evan Bayh point, Rex and Evan Bayh became good friends in 1986 when Evan Bayh was the Secretary of State and Rex Early was the Republican on the State Recount Commission, and there was a recount in Elkhart in the 3rd Congressional District, and so they spent hours in the car going back and forth to Elkhart together. Evan Bayh was at Rex Early's funeral.
Right.
Yeah.
He wrote a lovely note to Evan when Susan passed too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
how did you cover? I mean, I know you covered it as an objective journalist, but besides that, how did you cover that 96 primary, given your friendship? We've had this discussion several times, Jim, when you've been on the podcast. I mean, I hate to say it must have been tough, but there must have been a part of it that was like, well, this is what I got to do.
Well, here's the thing about covering politics. I mean, I covered politics for 34 years. I became friends with an awful lot of politicians, including the people in this room. When you're friends with somebody, approaching them's not an issue. It's an advantage. But in terms of being fair, I mean, I always thought that I could ask tougher questions of my friends than I could if they weren't.
Because they knew it wasn't personal?
Right. I mean, if it's a legitimate question, they all have to be legitimate questions. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that was a problem.
Did you have an opportunity to interview Rex? I don't know who his press person would have been back in the day. Who was his press person?
I don't remember him having one. The fun part, the person he traveled with all the time was Kevin Eck, who was a pallbearer. Mm-hmm. He's close to Kevin to the end. But Kevin, his official job was to be his driver, and for all anybody knew, Kevin didn't have a name because Rex always called him Driver.
Murray, you made a good point a few minutes ago about chairmanship being different, and obviously want Ann to weigh in on this too. Rex obviously is seen as a bit of a throwback. In the column I wrote for the Star, I call him the GOP OG. Is there room for the Rex Earlys of the world in today's politics who play it rough and tumble on the partisan side, but then, kind of on the personal side? I'm sure that he would have done anything in the world for Ann Delaney or her husband if they needed it.
Well, I'd like to think there is, right? I mean, politics has changed so much. You talked about, the State House media, the way it used to be. We've talked about this and the way it is today, and you don't have the relationships, but social media has changed things so much in politics. But Evan and Joe Hogsett were at the funeral. You have relationships across the aisle. I think what you're seeing at the State House is quite a bit different than maybe it used to be. But I have confidence it'll work its way back, I think. You have. The worst thing that happens is, supermajorities or 20-5 council majorities and so forth. And I think in most, I think that works its way back. I hope so.
Politics has changed in other ways too. Rex got started as a precinct committeeman in his neighbor on the south side, and there are still there are still precinct committee people, but they don't even live in their neighborhood. They're just somebody who gets appointed by the county chairman.
You can't find them.
Right.
That's why I frankly think the whole code has to be changed, because the party apparatus is woven into the code.
No doubt.
And it's not relevant anymore. When you can vote anywhere, your precinct committeeman's not even going to know whether you voted or not. So it's the structure is completely different.
Well,
I hope you're not being too optimistic. I hope you're correct. But boy,
I am optimistic. But the money part of it has taken over for party politics, which is a shame.
Citizens United has made a huge difference.
Well, when I was chair, John McCain came to Indianapolis, had a short fundraiser at the Columbia Club. It was one of the 1.5 times he visited Indiana when he was a presidential candidate. And I said,
the other time was the Sunday before Election Day.
Well, I think it was like Monday night. Yeah. Thank you so much. So I said to him, Senator, it's an honor to meet you. We exchanged pleasantries. He was nice as he could be. And I said, sir, I feel duty-bound on behalf of the Central Committee to ask you if you would ever consider amending McCain-Feingold Act, because it's created hardships for the party, and his demeanor changed immediately, and he made it very clear he had no intention of
doing it.
And I can second that conversation because it happened right in front of me. It was at the Conrad or someplace, because he was going to Kite's
It was a
house,
Conrad, yeah.
And that's when John McCain wore the his POW bracelet that I wore all the time. And I remember he he was very pleasant. Then all of a sudden I went, what did Murray say?
But I mean, whether you call them super PACs or big PACs, it's really, it's taken over party politics.
And even school board politics now. You don't know who the people behind these candidates are. They may not even live in Indiana.
Yeah.
And yet we're getting inundated with that money. It really needs to be reined in.
We had the podcast we did, Jim and I did, with Robin Winston and Mike McDaniel, and then we did one with Jim Kittle and Ed Tracy, just using them as examples as state party chairman, obviously Murray and Kip. And the question I ask, and I want to make sure I ask you, Ann, is I asked them, did you ever get grief from your own party because you were nice or you laughed at what the other person had to say? And
no.
Everyone said it didn't matter because I don't care. A, did you ever laugh? B, did you ever get any grief at what Rex said?
Are we talking about on the show?
Yes. Or anywhere where there was an audience.
Oh, yeah. There would be people that would disagree with what you said and want to talk about that. But, that's part of the whole process. Just as you have wingnuts in your party, we have people that are to the left of middle in our party, and they'll second guess some of the points you make. But nothing that and Rex, it was just...
But did Rex say something and you just laughed because it was funny, and then they said, "Why are you laughing at him?
No.
You need to tell him go to hell or whatever."
I raised my voice enough times with Rex that I didn't have to give bona fides that we were adversaries. It was readily apparent. I never got any grief for that.
Hey, before we get too far away from it, I think one of the things that was key to Rex's existence is that he held grudges and he tried to get even. And since we mentioned Steve Goldsmith,
Irish Alzheimer's,
yes, Murray, you need to tell the story about Rex talking to the NPR reporter at the national convention in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, so I was chairman. That was the one convention I had, and I forget who it was. Maybe it was you. Somebody came to me and said, "Mr. Chairman, I think we have a problem here." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And said, "Well, it was NPR or CNN or somebody is just interviewed Rex." And because we had kind of and sent them.
Well, this was 2012 too, I think, for
right.
context. So he ran against Steve Goldsmith in 1996. This is 2012.
Right. Yeah, this is 16 years later. And I said, "Well, that's okay. He's colorful. It's boring. It's the early days of the convention." He said, "Well, they said to him, now that you're in Minneapolis, St. Paul, what are you doing with your free time?" And he says, "Oh, we're going out getting drunk," and I think somebody used the word carousing. Maybe that's not what he said, carousing. And she laughed.
Chasing women, I think is what he said.
Yeah.
Bras, is what he said. We could say it. It's all right. Ann's here. If Ann wasn't here, we couldn't say it.
The reporter laughed, and he just said, "Now, what's your name?" And he says, "Steve Goldsmith." And that was
the bit. That's my favorite Rex Early story by far. Was it McDaniel sitting next to him, or?
I don't know where they were.
I think so.
Yeah, probably. Well, McDaniels was always
sitting next to him to try to bring him under control. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Murray, I've seen you at more Republican Party events than I can count, staffed you at many of them. But in the last several years, I noticed that it seemed like you made a special effort to bring Rex.
Yeah. Well, I guess I've gotten old school. I grew up with these politicos, my family and others that I used to listen to at their knee, and was fascinated to tell more stories. I guess we're the ones telling stories now. But, he was so close to our family, to Dad and to Alex and to me. And I mentioned this the other day, he was actually very close to my mom's brother, Bob. My mom had two brothers. One was a banker and swam and all that, very serious dude. And then she had another brother that was a complete catbird. And Rex
identified with them.
And Jug, the three of them and all that. So, we adore Rex, and our family loved him, really. And he and my dad had a really special relationship. Yeah.
It was fun in the 2012 convention in Tampa. I got to play euchre with David Brooks
That was when the hurricane came.
Yeah. David Brooks.
So, just for 12 was Tampa, so 08 was Twin Cities, right?
Oh, wait, right. That's right. 2008 was.
So it was only 12 years later. I stand corrected.
That's not exaggerating.
And it was Mike McDaniel and Rex Early against David Brooks and me. And I have to admit, not only was Rex, first off, Rex and Mike McDaniel got thumped, by the way, David Brooks and me. But Rex was still intimidating to that point, even though, I was 40-something. I was 45, maybe, 44, that I was scared to over-trump him a few times. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to throw this card and he's going to scream at me and cuss at me. And maybe I should just let this one slide and hope that the next card works out okay.
Did you?
Yes. I did at least 2 or 3 times. Where I'm like, you know what? He's had 9s and 10s for like 20 straight hands. So I think he's going to lose it here pretty soon. What was Rex like? You're talking about politically and being on the shows and this. Like, what was it like to have lunch with him, have dinner, breakfast, to be with him in a place where it was just the two of you and there wasn't necessarily any show? Ann, did you have that experience many times?
Well, I certainly had dinner with him several times, but probably never alone. He never drank, which was something that I always thought.
Well, he'd have a glass of wine.
Yeah, but he would nurse it all night long.
Yeah.
And the one party we had, remember, we delegated to him to bring the wine. Boy, that was a mistake. I think he showed up with like Boone's Farm or White Rabbit or something. And I'm thinking, I'm not even sure I'd use this for cooking. But yeah, so but he... he was entertaining. He was always on. He was always ready to tell a story. He was always ready to reminisce about something. So it was very entertaining.
And he always had a manner of speaking that was unlike anybody else. He had these phrases. He didn't
just get off the new Rangoon from whatever the hell was. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Instead of saying I didn't just fall off the turnip truck, it would be I didn't come in on the noon balloon from Rangoon. Yeah.
Yes.
But he had the Rexisms, but also just the terms. He would refer to every politician has at least one aide, and
right.
He referred to them as mummy dummies.
Yeah, well,
he everything. If you say you had a poll result and he didn't think it was accurate, he would call them the numbers moogie foogie.
Yeah. Details were not his forte.
But they were useful terms. I mean,
they were.
But he usually had something going on too, right? And so Rex paid attention to business. I liked when Pat in his eulogy said, he started an engineering company and didn't know a thing about engineering. Then he started an insurance company and didn't know a thing about insurance, right? and sold both and did well, right? So he always had an eye on something going on.
Yeah.
I'm talking about.
The Republicans were out of power for 16 years. The Democrats won 4 straight gubernatorial elections, controlled the House for much of that time. I don't think they ever controlled the Senate in those 16 years.
Not
but
in those 16 years.
Attorney General and Secretary of State victories here and there. How did Rex react to Mitch Daniels coming back and running for governor and seeing the change in politics, the flip that clearly has occurred in the last couple of decades?
Well, I mean, he liked Mitch. I mean, they were together from time to time, the Power and Light stockholders, as you recall.
Well, they were board members together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, he was a Luger guy, right? Mitch was, and so was Rex. So I mean, he was ready, right? He didn't think the prior gubernatorial ticket did very well. So
the one in 2000,
right? We lost in a squeaker by 344,000 votes.
Well, you were saddled with the top of the ticket that was very hard to like.
Well, I'll tell you a quick story about that. So they send me down to Southwest.
Let's just say this very quickly. 2000, Frank O'Bannon and Joe Kernan run for re-election
and they're
against David McIntosh and Murray Clark. Yeah. And you're right. O'Bannon's basically everybody's grandpa, very popular. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Great guy, as is Joe.
Absolutely.
So they send us down to Southwest Indiana, I think because they figured the fewest amount of votes were there, and they weren't sure we could do too much damage down there. So we go down.
Who's we?
That's Rex and my dad and me and his big Lincoln. And they're both Marines, and so he's got 3 cassettes in his Lincoln, and they're all of Marine Corps bands playing the same damn hymn. And Rex couldn't hear, my dad couldn't see, so every other word was, huh? And so we started in Vincennes, and then we went to all these small communities and played to huge crowds of 9 or 10. And so he would always say, boy, it's so good to be back home again. Oh, they loved Rex. Everybody knows him down there, right? And so after about the 5th location, right in that big Lincoln, and Dad says, Rex, this is the 5th place you said you came from and you grew up in. What's up with that? He goes, well, my dad moved around a lot.
You're listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. We're discussing the life of Rex Early. He left us somewhat fittingly as a Marine Corps veteran on Veterans Day, November 11th. We have a few minutes left with Ann Delaney, Murray Clark, and Jim Shella. Jim, I'm going to start with you because we're going to ask Ann the 5 questions here at the end as well. Take a minute or two, and each of you, and just give us your final thoughts about Rex, his friendship, his impact, his sense of loyalty and kindness, which, he didn't disguise his loyalty, but every once in a while he could disguise his kindness.
Yeah, I mean, I think the takeaway from Rex's life is that he had fun, and he brought fun to everybody else's life. I mean, I said, I don't think I ever had an encounter with him when I didn't leave laughing, but also with something to think about. I mean, he was very serious about politics and a number of other things, but he, with his manner of speaking and his approach, he brought fun to everything, and I think it's a great legacy, personally.
Murray?
Well, he was so fun and interesting to be around, right? And there was no challenge he wouldn't face. He was very confident in his own skin, right? But the biggest thing to me, probably, he was intensely loyal. Once you got into Rex's inner circle of friends, and there's very little you could do, or you could ask him to do that he wouldn't do for you. A Marine to the end, really, in that regard.
Ann?
I think that's all true. And the other thing I think I admired most about him is he didn't take himself very seriously. I mean, he was willing to laugh at himself. And although he felt deeply about the politics, he could see that sometimes it was idiotic, and he could laugh at it nonetheless. And he wasn't adverse to saying that. I mean, some of the things that he did, to try to be the kind of chairman he thought he was supposed to be, like when that was at the 8th district race with the 7 candidates, and he couldn't remember the names, and he writes them on the palm of his hand. But
we need to establish on Indiana Week in Review. We had a no notes, no props rule.
Well, yeah, there's a no notes, no props.
That's
so
right.
He writes them on his hand, but the lights are pretty hot, and it starts to run. And I think he made out the first 2 of the 7, and that's all he could do. But he could laugh about that.
Yep.
He thought it was funny too. And he was very amusing and intensely loyal. But the flip side of the intensely loyal is if you crossed him, he would remember, probably till his deathbed.
And you mentioned former Governor By, former Senator By, current Mayor Joe Hogsett, obviously you, Ann. I talked to Ed Tracy for a column I wrote in the Star, and Ed said the exact same thing. So too... The Eicholtzes. I mean, we talked about that. Dillon's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Politics to him was kind of like, it was serious, it was a vocation, it was entertainment, it was a lot of things, but it wasn't a barrier to friendship.
Well, you had to have people from the other side. You had to have people who shared that interest. You couldn't, it couldn't just be an echo chamber. You had to hear the other side and debate it back and forth.
Which is different than today. More people living in bubbles. Yeah.
Now they're in bubbles completely. Homeschool and church, and that's it. You don't talk to anybody else.
One thing we haven't mentioned that we need to, I think, is that in 2016, Rex was the Indiana chairman for Donald Trump. Now, whatever you think of Donald Trump, Rex got on board early and, in fact, tried to get others to take the mantle there and couldn't. And so, at the age of what, 82, he was out campaigning every day for Donald Trump because it's what he believed in. And Trump had a big day in Indiana.
Yeah, twice.
Yeah.
Twice. Let's get to the
figure.
Well, and we should also say that his wife Barbara was a living saint.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
68 years?
68 years.
Absolutely.
They were together for 3 years before they got married, and they were married for 68 years.
And what was the event?
So they were I don't even
It was his
do the math on
80th
that.
birthday party, which I emceed at the White River Yacht Club. He was recognized by a number of people, and at the end of the evening,
Well, no, you asked Barbara to come up, and she had, and she made one statement: "It ain't been a bed of roses."
That's right.
But family was important to Rex. Big
Well,
time.
and
She
Great
was-
kid.
she was wonderful
Great
while he
kid.
was ill. I mean, she couldn't have not have been more devoted.
and he's buried in the Union Chapel
Cemetery.
literally 15 feet from his property line of this home he loved and the river that he loved. I mean, and the Marines did their ceremony it was touching. It was cool.
Since we have Ann Delaney on the podcast, we have her for a few more minutes before she has to go do Week in Review, Indiana Week in Review. We're going to ask her the 5 questions because Jim and Murray have already answered them. Ann, are you ready?
Sure.
What was your first job?
My first job was waiting on tables
Where?
in New York.
What was your first concert?
Oh, my gosh. I didn't go to many concerts. I can't remember the first one. We were too broke. We had no money to go to concerts. Sorry.
That's been a popular answer. I have to say that a lot
Oh,
of
that's
people.
true.
Number 3, if you could suggest any book to read other than It's a Mighty Thin Pancake That Don't Have Two Sides, which book would you recommend?
For what purpose? Are we talking about novel, history?
Anything. You
book?
choice.
and don't forget, Ann's written a book.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't recommend Politics for Dummies. Any one of the 3 versions. No, I think, the one that A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. How about that?
If you could witness any event in history, be there as it happens, which event would you choose?
Oh, I can think of one, but I probably shouldn't say it.
Say it.
Donald Trump's funeral.
But it hasn't happened yet.
I know, but you asked if I could witness any. Oh, one that had occurred in the past.
Yes, in history.
Oh, okay. One that occurred in the past. Maybe the signing of the surrender of the Japanese.
Oh, on board the USS Missouri, September of 45. Last
Yep.
question. If you could have dinner with anyone living today, 2 hours off the record just to chat, whom would you choose?
I'd take Michelle Obama.
You have been listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmon Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn. I should probably have John's Famous Stews, sponsor this one for Rex, and McAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. We have been discussing the life, times, language, and fun of Rexford Carlisle Early. Our guests have been Jim Shella, Murray Clark, and Ann Delaney. Thank you all very much for making time.
You're welcome.
It's been fun. Thanks.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.
This podcast was produced and edited by Chris Spangle and Leaders and Legends LLC. If you're interested in starting a podcast or taking yours to the next level, please contact us at leadersandlegends.net.